to My Years this week, chosen by Smith and Burrows. They've got a new album coming out very shortly. Only Smith and Burrows is good enough. Just 9 years on from their debut Christmas album, Funny Looking Angels. And Andy Burrows and Tom Smith. Tom, the editor's frontman. Andy, of course, previously of Razorlight and with so many successes behind him. Well, they're going to be choosing tracks this week in turn. So it's going to be Andy first today, and his choice is Cream and White Room.
I used to be in a band called The Shoes, a covers band, when I was about 11, and my dad used to drive me over there every Sunday for a rehearsal. When we played this song, it was the opener and the closer to our set. We only had about 5 songs. Just evokes brilliant memories of being a kid and learning sort of old classics. And Chris Thomas, the legendary record producer, lived down the road from where we rehearsed. We used to go and spy on his house. Which is funny because I went on to work with him with Razorlight several years later. But it's just a great memory of, being a kid, learning the drums, being in a covers band.
Were you able to... Well, I was going to say, were you able to emulate Ginger at all in your performance?
I'm not quite sure how much of a disservice I did back in the days. I was only 11.
Well, I'm sure you looked the part, yeah, and you sounded it, I'm quite sure, as well. No doubt, no doubt. Now, Tom, your first choice is Carole King, and It's Too Late. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, a couple of the songs that I was thinking about for this are ones which remind me of my parents, really, and their musical tastes, and I guess music being on and around when growing up in the house, but specifically in the car. We always used to go camping. That was what we did every half-term holiday, camping, Lake District, places like that, but hours and hours and days in the car. And Carole King, James Taylor, and some other things that we listened to a lot on cassette. So this song, It's Too Late, really reminds me of my parents' music, really, and their tastes. Yesterday I was talking about being in the car, listening to my mum and dad's music, and this is another record which they listened to a lot. And I was thinking about this album. Obviously there's a whole number of amazing songs on this record, but I think it was definitely the first music that I was aware of that had any kind of political or social issues in the words. And I remember being a child and thinking about, these songs about people that are struggling or having their struggles going on in their lives. So it was definitely the first time music was more than just wallpaper or pop music or just, something to get excited by. It made me think for the first time.
How did you get started in music yourself? What inspired you to take up music?
Well, I started playing the trumpet at a very early age. My mum and dad encouraged me to take up an instrument. Both my parents are science teachers, but they both played instruments as well. So mum, she played the flute very well, and dad played the guitar. And dad, when I was a bit older, taught me my first chords. But yeah, I was just kind of encouraged to take up the trumpet, and then played in orchestras and things like that. Then discovered, kind of pop music and, I don't know, things like Bruce and Michael Jackson when I was, getting cassettes for the first time.
Andy, what about you? I mean, we had you yesterday playing the Ginger Baker part at the age of 11, but what moved you on to different areas of music and doing it in a professional sense?
Similarly to Tom, I actually started on not the trumpet, but the cornet. I played in brass bands and stuff, and it was a terrible sound. Terrible sound I was making. So I swiftly moved to the drum kit. As a cornet player in the band, looking behind me, there was a drummer over there, and he looked like he was having a much better time. So about age 10, I decided to switch from cornet to drums, and I just spent the next 5 years playing in this brass band, playing drums and percussion and stuff. So yeah, started at the cornet and elevated to a lot noisier drum kits.
I think it's interesting that both of you had that kind of wider range of music. You didn't just sort of pick up a guitar or whatever and start playing rock. You had that wider range of music, a sort of background, a basis on which to build. And do you think that's affected your songwriting in the years to come?
We have discussed writing a trumpet and cornet duo for our next record, so just watch this space.
Right, can't wait.
The world isn't ready for that, I'm sure.
Right, and your choice today is a Prince track, I Would Die For You. Tell me about that.
I mean, this song is, it's a phenomenal song. That record, Purple Rain, is just incredible. It's hard to choose a song off that album, but this song, I remember etching into the side of my bedside table. I definitely wrote it in with a compass because it was like a late night show. And up to a few years ago, we still had that bedside table, so I went back and looked at the songs that I'd etched on it, and this was one of them. And then many years later, the year I met my wife in Paris whilst we were touring with Razorlight, I heard it in a shop, and it was pre-Shazam, or at least if Shazam existed, I didn't have Shazam. And I couldn't quite remember what it was. It sounded like Prince, and it's an amazing song, but it was kind of giving me goosebumps. And went back to the same shop that I'd heard it in a few weeks later, and lo and behold, the song was on again. They must have had like a playlist for the shop. And that time I asked, in my best French, the guy behind the counter what it was, and he reminded me it was a Prince song, and I went back and started obsessing over the song, and it reminds me of when I first met her. So it's kind of got like a double memory fondness for me, this song.
I Would Die For You. It's Prince and the Revolution, and chosen by Andy Burrows. The damage that was caused to furnishings through sets of compasses over the years cannot be overstated. Thankfully, they don't seem to bother with them these days. So anyway, that's Andy and Tom choosing tracks of their years. Smith and Burrows back with 2 more tomorrow.
I love Squeeze so much. I think Glenn Tilbrook and Chris Difford are just 2 of the songwriting greats. And this song, to sort of go along with Tom's driving as a kid theme, we used to drive around in my dad's bright yellow Triumph Spitfire, which he had to get rid of after a while because apparently it made us children too cold when he had the roof down. But I just remember, you know, the pounding Gilson Lavis drums all the way through the song. It goes the whole way through, this pounding kick drum. And I just remember my dad, who can't play the drums, but he just used to like wallop the steering wheel with this drum pattern, and it's just such a joyous song, and at the end it breaks into this big chorus choir vocals, and it's just, I love this song so much. Yeah, so it reminds me of those drives as a kid, and yeah, and watching my dad try and play drums on the steering wheel.
And Gilson, what a player, and still at it today with Jules Holland. Yeah,
he's phenomenal. He's absolutely brilliant. I think he's also a rather brilliant artist as well. And I always remember, bizarrely, Glenn Tilbrook turned up at my 30th birthday party, and it still puzzles me to this day that he was there. But anyway, he was. What a band! What a song!
And what a party that must have been.
It was a top party, I tell you that.
Now tell me about how you two started working together.
Well, we met at Glastonbury Festival after Razorlight had played on the other stage, and we'd played earlier on in the day on the same stage, and we had a night there, and Andy knew my then girlfriend, now wife, and, you know, we just hung out socially, living in the same part of North London, going out for beers and just talking about the world and life and music, and we've just remained really close friends. I think over the last 15 years, we've gone through similar things at similar times. We've like getting married or having kids and things, and our kind of musical relationship has existed alongside our normal friendship.
Yeah, sometimes you can be friends with somebody, but you never dream of working together. You just don't see a way of doing something together. But obviously, you both felt, well, we can write, we can do some songs together, we can perform together.
Well, I put out a little miniature charity album in 2008 whilst I was still in Razorlight, and I was doing some promo, and Tom just sort of suggested one day, probably over a pint at the pub, that he would join me for some promo. We went and did a radio session together, and obviously it was a lot of fun, and it worked out really well, and it just kind of gave us a very initial, early doors, you know, idea of doing a little bit of music together, which then turned into, a couple of years later, us two getting in a studio and trying some covers out. But it was a very organic process. You know, Tom very kindly came and helped me with that, and then it just sort of grew. But like Tom said, we were very much mates first. It was almost like, you know, when you're at school and you form a band, it was that kind of vibe. And it's worked out pretty well.
I think you can say it has worked out pretty well. Yeah, certainly. Tom, your next choice is R.E.M.
You get asked quite a lot in this job, what's your favourite band? And R.E.M. are the one I always say. I discovered them maybe 14, 15 years old. So at that age when I was no longer just kind of experiencing kind of music that my parents listened to, but I started to fall in love with things and discover things for myself. So I was aware of the big songs from Automatic for the People. And then when they came back with the Monster record, yeah, my appetite, you know, was wet from Everybody Hurts and things like that. But then I remember What's the Frequency, Kenneth coming out, and it just being like this kind of visceral, kind of really exciting, guitar-driven song. But at the same time, I was really kind of just falling in love with discovering music and going back and listening to, obviously because they had 10, 15 years worth of albums before this that I could go back and discover. And what I love about R.E.M. is the mystery and how kind of they feel like they're beamed from another world. Britpop was a big thing for me, but R.E.M. felt like they were from another universe, you know, being American and being, it's just so alien. And even the video for What's the Frequency, it starts with, you can just see Michael's kind of legs to start with, and then it pans up and he shaved his head, and it's the first time people had seen that, and it's just the most incredible moment, really. Been so lucky over the years. Editors have toured with R.E.M. and spent time with them, and they're a wonderful band. I love nearly all of their albums, but this one just reminds me of discovering them for the first time. Britpop was big for me and Andy. It's such an exciting time. It was everywhere in the politics and in the papers, and it was just culturally enormous, of course. And I was kind of trying to learn how to play the guitar for the first time. And my dad taught me a few chords. And I think Talk Tonight by Oasis is the first song I could probably play on guitar. A lot of these Oasis songs from the time are quite simple, and I don't mean that in a negative way. They're good songs to learn to play the guitar to. I always like the kind of quieter side to what they did. So this is a lovely song.
And Andy, your next choice is The Wonder Stuff.
When I was just moving along slightly from Monday when I was 11 and I was in the shoes, when we were at secondary school, I formed a band with some friends, and we were really into sort of Ned's Atomic Dustbin, Carter and Pop Will Eat Itself, and EMF and all these bands, and we tried to form a band and we called ourselves MDF. And somebody pointed out to us politely at one of our rehearsal sessions that was actually just a bit of wood. So we had to rethink the name. But this was one of the first songs that I'm not sure if we learned to play. I'm not actually sure if we learned to play any songs properly. We just made tape covers and stuff. But this song is just such a wonderful, joyous song, and it reminds me so much of those very sort of carefree, innocent days where you're just, it's all the world is all ahead of you and it's all a wonder, and you can't wait to get out there and try and be a pop star, try and be in a band. I think also the fact that it has Kirsty MacColl with the backing vocals just makes it even more magical. And I love the way they sort of turn her up, and by the time it gets to the end, she's on full lead vocals, basically. And it's just, I love this song so much. It reminds me of being a teenager and starting out in bands. I love this song. I mean, her voice is just it's such a beautiful comfort. When I first heard this song, I thought I knew it from my childhood. And still, till very recently, I thought I knew it from my childhood, until actually I looked it up for this interview and realised it only came out in 2000, which doesn't quite compute with my frazzled brain, because I could swear it was a song I knew when I was little. But then when I discovered that the other day, that made it even more special. It really does feel like a kind of a warm hug from childhood. But I think I was 20 when I first heard it. So, I don't know. She's just wonderful. What an incredible voice. I love her so much, and this song is just magic.
Tom, your final choice is going to be a Radiohead track, No Surprises.
Yeah, Glastonbury Festival is such an important thing for me. Obviously, it's where I met Andy. Editors have had some incredible shows there over the years, and I grew up not too far from the site. And so when we were 16, 17, what most people did when they passed their GCSEs or done their GCSEs is they'd go to Glastonbury Festival. And 1997 was the first time I went. It was a biblical rainstorm year, so lots of mud. It was quite an experience, quite an ordeal. But Radiohead headlined, and I remember this song. I hadn't heard it before. I don't think OK Computer had been released at that point. I'd seen Radiohead support R.E.M. a couple of years before, so I was aware of them and the bends and stuff. But I remember hearing this song in the pouring rain at a place that has gone on to become the most special place in the world for me, Glastonbury Festival, and thinking, wow, that's what I want to do, what those people were doing on that stage that night. So, I mean, it's a beautiful song. Again, similar to R.E.M., they do feel like they're beamed from another planet. They feel different to everybody else. I think that's what makes them so special. But yeah, No Surprises is a lullaby, beautiful song.
Well, before we play it, let's just talk a little bit about your album. You've rushed out a second album after 9 years called Only Smith and Burrows is Good Enough. Tell me about your collaborative process. Do you come together just every so often for a few hours or something? Or is it something you meet together and you intensely work on a new piece of work?
No, obviously we spend a lot of time together as friends and kind of socially. And the Christmas record we made, like you say, nearly 10 years ago, we've always intended to follow it up, and we always wanted to do more writing of original songs, because there were a lot of covers on that album, but there are a couple of original songs that really kind of ignited something in us as songwriters working together. And it's so wonderful to have a friendship, but you have a working kind of creative thing as well. So yeah, over the years, we just had, like you said, like an afternoon here, an afternoon there, when our diaries would allow it, that we could work together in my studio and begin building this album. Over the last 4 years, it's kind of accelerated, still not too very quickly, but things kind of snowballed. And then last summer, or 2 summers ago, we realised we had an album's worth of material, and we took ourselves to Nashville to make it with a producer called Jakir King, and here we are now. So yeah, it took a while, but Smith and Burrows don't really have an agenda, or there's no one kind of with a whip behind us. It's grown out of our friendship, so it kind of needs to take its time, really.
And I think that's why the songs that do come out of it are so important. They kind of grab people. I mean, I'm thinking the original album, When the Thames Froze, that's a great song which will last for years. And Taking the Time seems to just give you songs that are different and very much of your making.
Well, we've never been cool, so we exist outside of that. So there's no scene that we fit into. We're our own thing, which I think helps.
And you obviously have good fun doing it.
Oh, we have the best of fun. From writing the songs in Tom's attic to sitting in pub talking about old times and new times to going to Nashville together. I mean, it's not every day that you get to go and spend 6 weeks period renting a house with your best mate, recording in Nashville. It's something else, really. So I think we both feel very lucky that we get to have this wonderful outlet for our music as a side project that will hopefully just roll on until we're no longer here.
Well, there are songs here that will last on this album. Old TV shows in Parliament who we've already heard, they're fantastic. And I've no doubt Only Smith and Burrows is good enough, will be good enough for a lot of people for many, many years to come. Comes out on the 19th of February. And Tom and Andy, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.